I think, Parker Cannon being just a super attractive guy probably doesn't hurt how people like that band.
I mean, you know what? It brings in the girlies and the gays.
Is this a good band or is Parker Cannon just hot?
Weigh in the comments.
The Emo Social Club is reviewing all of the albums ever made that have ever been played on Warped Tour.
We actually can't stop doing this podcast or series until we finish all of them.
We're reviewing every album that has ever come out by every band that is in the emo scene of all time. Hopefully that will not get tiresome, or we won't become a shell of what we once were now that we've known every song and every band and every album they've ever made. On this episode, we are reviewing Under Soil and Dirt by The Story So Far, a highly requested band. While we were doing the series. A lot of people left comments like, when will you review The Story So Far? I always find strange when people are leaving that as a comment, because why do you need to hear what we have to say about a record that you love? And now we're going to fucking tell you. So thanks for tuning in. Lizzie, before we talk about Under Soil and Dirt by The Story So Far, tell us more about them and the album.
So this was their debut album. It came out on June 21st, 2011 via Pure Noise Records. They are cited to be heavily influenced by Transit. The singles off of here were Quicksand, High Regard, Placeholder, and Rome. After this, they went on tour with We Are the Union and I Call Fives, and then later supported Census Fail on their tour. Overall, they had a good reception and reviews, so pretty 4, 3.5 stars, pretty decent. They never charted here in the US, but they charted number 35 on the UK rock and metal albums charts.
I don't know necessarily why this is heavily requested. I'm assuming because this band has a very fervent easycore and somewhat hardcore backing. And I think having a lot of fans from those sorts of scenes has a lot more of that beyond just like the pop punk crowd, the punk crowd, also that like hardcore and easycore crowd, which is very fervent in their love for these bands. So I'm assuming that's why we got a lot of it. And I think, Parker Cannon being just a super attractive guy probably doesn't hurt how people like that band.
I mean, you know what? It brings in the girlies and the gays. So
is this a good band or is Parker Cannon just hot?
Weigh in the comments.
Before we get into our opinions and our thoughts on Under Soil and Dirt, make sure to subscribe. We are going through every single album by all of these bands. We'll be talking about a lot of different bands, a lot of albums by those bands, so you don't want to miss when we talk about your favorite. Leave some suggestions in the comments. We've had a lot of people already do that. That's why we're talking about this one in particular. So make sure to drop some other recommendations. We might do one of those because maybe it's a band that we know, but we don't know which album to pick by that band. So we'll be happy to do one of the ones you throw in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking, and then we'll think that too. I became acquainted with The Story So Far through What You Don't See, the follow-up to this record. That one came out after I was already pretty out of the pop punk and brocore and like the interest in these new bands at the beginning of, the 2010s to like 2015 or so. I kind of fell out of favor with a lot of these bands. For some reason, that album like stuck out to check out. I don't know if it was like recommended to me or what, but I checked it out and I really liked it. It reminded me a lot of like A Day to Remember and a lot of the more easycore stuff that I'd listened to in like 2006, 7, 8, around that era. So it brought back those memories. I had never checked out this record. I never went back to this one, but I knew Quicksand because everybody who likes The Story So Far is very annoying about Quicksand, saying, "Oh, you got to listen to that one too." So now that I've listened to it, I'm kind of re-evaluating my love for The Story So Far, and I'm like, is this band good? There is a lot of that like hardcore influence on this, and a lot of that heavier influence on it. And I think the biggest place that is impacting it is in the vocals, because there's not a ton of melody in this. There's very like straightforward or top of his voice yelling notes, which he has a really good voice. He's got really good tone to his voice. It's just there's not a lot of like movement in it. I'm reminded of something that like Derek Descanio of State Champs was saying to us, is like he is more of a melody guy. So he's more interested in going into the studio, finding really fun and catchy melodies to sing. And he's not so necessarily concerned about like the lyrics or other parts of it, but he wants to hit you with that like really catchy pop hook in the vocals. And this being more of a pop punk band, I assume, isn't really doing a lot of pop in it. It's doing a lot more like getting the pitches out there. yelling along is like kind of the way you would sing along to this instead of singing with melodies and all that. So that was one thing that didn't really catch me with this. I do think that the singles are really good. I really enjoy Quicksand. I enjoy Rome. I enjoy Placeholder. I enjoy those songs, but like there's just so much in here that I just like, I don't really feel anything. The music doesn't really move you through it. It feels so much like it's just trying to get to the next thing and it doesn't ever go anywhere. It's just moving you from verse, chorus. And it's like, oh, just you wait. The next part's going to get really good. And we never get to a really good part until we get to Quicksand, until we get to Rome. I could skip so much on this album and not feel like I missed anything. And I feel really bad. Listened to it a bunch of times, but just, yeah, I'll just put Quicksand on my playlist and move on.
I feel like I understand what you mean with the vocals, especially because he is somebody who is from, Parker Cannon is somebody who is from like a hardcore punk background, which is music I listen to, and I really enjoy punk music too, so I can understand what he's doing. But also lyrically speaking, if you look at the lyrics, it can tell a story that's cohesive, but it's very quick in and out, which is okay if you're doing punk or hardcore. But these are songs that are 3 minutes and 30 seconds, almost 4 minutes. And I'm expecting something a little bit longer and more substantive to an extent. And I get a little bit lost there when it isn't like that.
The lyrics are so clumsy on this. There's so many things that are like too many syllables or he wants to fit in the right words. It's very like Pete Wentz in that way to me, but he doesn't have the chops to like make it melodic. So it's just like saying a lot of syllables all in like this one little tight space, but it doesn't have the same level of musicianship that I think a lot of bands that have done that same idea have excelled at. I think that it's trying to tell a story, and that story is just not one I really give a shit about.
Yeah. So I do feel that the story so far is a band that when they were originally coming out and like being really big is when I stepped away more from the pop punk and emo scene because it was getting very stale, brocore, and generic. Nothing was really popping out to me.
And this is the one.
I've never listened to this ever. I've had a bunch of friends who really love this band and have said, hey, I need you to listen to this. Can you review this? Can you talk about this new album that they have out, et cetera, and so on over many, many years. And I always said, no, it's just not for me. It's just in that one specific era that never hit. And here I thought going into it, this was going to be a state champ situation. And I was sorely mistaken. It just was not what I anticipated. Everything kind of sounds the same, all a bit from maybe 2 songs that are switched up a little bit that stand out. I understand the appeal for a lot of people. I want a little bit more diversification when it comes to some of this music because I have already listened to a lot of similar stylings of this from what was originally out and also what has come out in the last probably like 5-6 years that I found to be a little bit more substantive by comparison, for myself at least.
This record really made me appreciate State Champs. It really did. I was like, holy shit, State Champs is so good. Thank you, The Story So Far, for reminding me how good State Champs is again.
Hey, is this just a State Champs podcast? Was there any tracks that stood out to you?
I mean, it's the singles. It's Rome. It's Quicksand. I think those 2 songs at the start of the record really started off strong. I'm done after those 2.
You need to tap out?
Yeah, like I just didn't really feel a lot for anything else, but those 2 songs at least have some catchy choruses to it. You know, I think that there's more singing on it. There's more melody in it. The instrumentation is moving you through it a lot better. It feels as though they spent more time making those the singles and everything else was sort of like, what else do you have to flesh out this record to be over 30 minutes? And it's like, didn't really need to make it over 30 minutes if these songs are so good. If they're going to take these songs and they're going to play them live now, right? Are you going to play everything from the later part of the record? Or is that going to be the one surprise that your old school, your hardcore fans love, but you're going to play Rome and Quicksand at every show, right?
Of course, yeah.
So it's like I think they spent more time on those, which is why those feel a lot better. I'm also this is a hot take that I'm gonna put
all
in
in
here.
one.
Yeah, I'm not putting in spicy takes. This is for right now. To my point of saying I feel like they spent more time on these 2 songs, there are some songs in this record that feel as though they cut and pasted parts of it in the recording of it, where like there's like parts of it where I feel like there's like a strong chop and it all of a sudden comes back into like the chorus or a part that repeats. And I'm like, that's just you cut and pasted that from another part when you recorded it. And it's so obvious. Like, it was jarringly obvious when I heard it. And I thought to myself, like, you just do it again. Like this
just run it back. Run it back.
This music isn't like that hard to play. Like, you can just do it again. Like, were you running out of time? Like, I don't know what it is. So I don't know if that's the case. I just am saying what it sounded like to my ear was that they literally chopped it and put it somewhere else. And it made an audio artifact that really did not sound good to my ear. Didn't hear it on the singles, which to me says these have to sound really good. We're going to make these sound really good.
Yeah.
And in that way, I'm like, well, if you didn't spend the time on the rest of the record, I don't really need to listen to the rest of the record then. They don't need to go on my playlist.
Yeah. I feel that they knew what was going to be their main singles. And then they said, this is what we obviously need to front load and spend the most time on because these are going to be sent radio play or just for consideration for publication
Quote,
and
unquote,
reviews. Yeah. One of the ones that did stand out to me, though, while everything else did kind of sound like generic pop punk, was Daughters. I think that this could have been a very thorough narrative song if there was just more lyricism developed throughout.
It's like half instrumental, which I actually kind of liked that it was half
Yeah, no,
instrumental.
I think that was fine.
I just thought the instrumental should have been a little bit more interesting.
I think just because the instrumentals were a little bit faster paired with the lyricism, because it's essentially talking about a girl who's obviously finding herself and she's being messy in college, and it's kind of like it's canon event. You have to let it happen. Parker Cannon. And
Parker Cannon events.
I feel like that is the one song, though, that is a little bit distinctive to me, that is distinctive as a story so far song. The other song that stood out to me, mainly because the guitar riffs in the background reminded me of the Fall Out Boy song Pros and Cons of Breathing, is Closure.
Yeah.
And that was really the only other thing that necessarily stood out to me. So last track, I think it wraps it up really well. This is probably the most interesting instrumental-wise to my ear. But otherwise, nothing really stood out fully with this.
You got any spicy takes on this one?
It just need a little bit more diversity here in a lot of this. There is so many good plot lines in some of these songs that you could just continue it on if you wrote more prosy, more concise.
I mean, I think you should write more poetically. Like some of the lyrics of him just like saying a story to me are why it's like you wrote the lyrics before you wrote the song. So now you're just like you're trying to fit them in versus trying to make a good song. But if you're trying to get a message or a story or whatever across, you can do that, but not make it clumsy. Like there is a difference between writing a song and writing a story, and you have to match up with the medium you're trying to make. And I feel like in the same way like Alesana didn't, in the same way that Saves the Day didn't, is like you're clumsy in your writing of it because you're writing a story, not a song.
Which, I mean, you can do if you're able to do it well.
Yeah, you're going to say Pete Wentz can do it, and I disagree.
Oh, no, he does it well.
Yeah.
But Parker Cannon here, the story so far did not do it very concisely with this.
I do think it improves on What You Don't See because I think he's writing songs and not writing stories.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear songs like Daughters or Mount Diablo, it is very strange because I don't automatically assume that songs are like about a woman you're mad at. But there are some times where I hear songs now where I go, that's why people think this genre is misogynistic. I was listening to Mount Diablo and I'm like, well, nothing's saying that like this is about a girl that he's like mad at or something. And there's a line of like, do you ever look yourself in the mirror and think about who you let between your thighs? And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
well, never mind.
That kind of really brings it out here. Yeah.
Like, I'm fine if the concept is like, I'm telling a story or like this record is a concept record and there's a lot there and this just happens to be part of that story, right? That's fine. But I do think that there is also a way of doing that with your lyrics that do not make it stand out and weird on the ear. We are looking back at these records and the legacy that they've had for this time and saying that's not part of the good legacy, right? Like these are bands who are benefited by young women who saw them at Warped Tour. And some of this stuff, like calling out one individual woman who might have hurt you, which as a guy who was in a band, I've done and am aware of that. And like how, you know, you're trying to put it in art and talk about your experience. But there is definitely a way where like we need to hear this and then go, okay, how can I say that in a way that doesn't sound like slut shaming or being shitty to somebody?
Yeah.
You know?
Because this came out in 2011, which
is right at that era.
It's during that time. It's before #MeToo. It's before a lot more clarity also
Before
came.
anybody was looking at any of these lyrics and
really
that
questioning
eye.
it. Because
Which you should, but I'm also like, of the time,
yeah.
I'm not mad at it. I'm just like, I can't unhear it, you know?
Right. I think it's a product of the time. And also, when we still look back and we analyze a little bit more of like the bands that were prominent during the main eras, during this newer era of pop punk, brocore, we're still looking and saying how many of these were non-men, how many of these were women, and it still really wasn't plentiful during that time. Even those who were underground. I mean, we've interviewed acts who said, I pivoted going into indie music because there were more women and support there from pop punk. It's still pretty prevalent. We do still have a lot more pop punk acts that are now female, non-binary, and doing incredibly well in the scene and getting more visibility. But when we start to change the lyricism, people become more self-aware, which I do feel that there are a lot more bands that have become more self-aware to an extent. Obviously, there's ones that fall through the caveats. It is hard to also get it out of your head at a certain point. If that is especially like the type of audience as well that you bring with when you have that type of rhetoric kind of really sticks their fingers in and they say, no, this is what it is forever.
It's weird. I don't like it now. I just, but I also don't think the song or the lyrics are like strong. So it's clumsy writing. I'm not going to fault them as a band for it, but I do hear it and go, I'm skipping that. I don't like that. Well, those are our thoughts. Unfortunately, not an album for us. Was it an album for you? Did you like it? Did you hate our review? How do you feel about it? Let us know in the comments. Give us more recommendations for stuff that you like that maybe we'll also talk
shit about
negatively about. Let us know what you think down in the comments. We are reviewing every record, so make sure to subscribe so that you know when we talk about a record that you like and when we have our really, really honest thoughts on it.
Yeah, if anything, we will tell you what we really feel.
But until the story so far and until Under Soil and Dirt, we will see you there.